"Sir, we need this seat for someone who actually matters here." Nicole Hartman said it just loud enough. Not loud enough to be reported. Loud enough to be remembered. Marcus Reid looked up from the folded newspaper on his tray table, and, for a moment, he didn't move at all. His boarding pass sat on the armrest, corner curling slightly from the humidity of the jet bridge. Seat 2C. First class. Purchased 11 days earlier, confirmation number stamped in his email like every other flight he'd taken this year. Nicole stood over him in her navy Meridian Airlines blazer, one hand braced against the overhead bin, the other holding a tablet against her hip like a shield. Behind her, in the galley, a heavy-set man in a charcoal suit tapped his wedding ring against a leather portfolio. Gregory Doyle, 61 years old. A Rolex that caught the cabin light every time he moved. His wrist, and a face already arranged into the practiced impatience of a man who believed waiting was something that happened to other people. Marcus set the newspaper down slowly. "Is there a problem with my seat?" Nicole's smile thinned into something closer to a warning. "There's been a reassignment." The word moved through the cabin, the way cold air moves through an open door. A woman in 3A lowered her phone. A man across the aisle stopped, mid-sip of his orange juice. Somebody 2 rows back whispered something to their neighbor, and the neighbor whispered something back. Marcus reached for his boarding pass and held it up. Not defensively, just factually, the way a man shows a receipt he already knows is correct. It says 2C. Right here. I can see that, sir." Nicole didn't look at it. Not really. Long enough to seem like she had, not long enough to actually read the confirmation code beneath his name. "I need you to gather your things. Before we go further, you should know what none of them did." 20 minutes earlier, in a boardroom 14 miles away, Marcus Reid's signature had gone through on a wire transfer of $41 million. The first installment of a $190 million recovery investment his firm, Beacon Ridge Capital, was making in Meridian Airlines, a company that, 3 weeks from now, would have made payroll only because of that money. Nobody in that cabin knew it yet. Not Nicole. Not Gregory Doyle, adjusting his cufflinks by the galley curtain. Not the man standing just behind him in a charcoal suit, watching everything with the stillness of someone counting his own exposure. This is the part of the story where you'll want to remember one small detail. A scratched silver dollar coin sitting in the left pocket of Marcus Reid's suit jacket. The way it had sat in every jacket he'd worn to every important meeting of his adult life. Keep that coin in mind. It comes back. "I paid for this seat," Marcus said quiet, even. "I need it. I have work to do before we land in Denver." Gregory Doyle didn't wait for an invitation to speak. "Nicole, I have a 9AM closing tomorrow. I always fly this route in 2C. Just move him. The word came out of Gregory's mouth the way a man tosses a napkin, without thought, without weight, because it cost him nothing. Marcus turned his head slow and looked at Gregory directly for the first time. Gregory didn't look back, not really. He looked through Marcus, the way people look through a chair that's in their way. Nicole gave Gregory a small, grateful nod, like a waitress accepting a tip before the meal was even finished. "We're handling it, Mr. Doyle." And that was the moment Marcus understood. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision that had already been made somewhere behind a curtain, dressed up afterward in company language, so it would sound like procedure instead of what it actually was. Marcus Reid grew up in a 2-bedroom rental on the east side of Cleveland, in a house where the radiator clanked all winter and the hot water ran out by 7 a.m. His mother, Dorothy Reid, worked the counter at a diner on Lorraine Avenue for 26 years, and every night she came home with the same tired feet and the same unbreakable posture, because Dorothy Reid did not believe in slouching in front of her son, no matter how the day had gone. When Marcus was 9, a regular customer flicked a silver dollar across the counter instead of putting it in her hand, the way you'd flick a coin to a dog. Dorothy picked it up without a word, wiped it on her apron, and later that night pressed it into Marcus's palm at the kitchen table. "Don't let anybody make you small just because they need to feel tall," she told him. And don't you ever throw money at somebody like it's a bone. He'd carried that coin in some pocket, some jacket, every day since. Not for luck, for memory. He built Beacon Ridge Capital out of a rented office above a laundromat and 11 rejected loan applications before the 12th one finally said yes. He learned to read a room before he ever spoke in it, because for a long time, speaking first only got him dismissed faster. He learned patience the way boxers learn to take a punch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because flinching cost you more than the hit itself. 31 years later, Beacon Ridge managed $3 billion in assets, and Marcus Reid still flew coach twice a month, just to remember what it felt like to be looked past, so he'd never build a company that made anyone else feel that way. He didn't wear his success. That was deliberate. No flashy watch, no monogrammed anything. Just a well-cut Navy suit that had cost exactly enough to be respectable and not $1 more. Because Marcus Reid had learned long ago that some people only extended respect after they'd already decided you deserved it. And he refused to spend his life auditioning for that decision. Nicole Hartman had been flying for Meridian for 6 years. She wasn't cruel by nature. That would almost have been simpler to explain. She was accommodating, the way people become accommodating, when their paycheck depends on which passengers file complaints that reach corporate. She had learned, without anyone ever saying it directly, which kinds of passengers got the benefit of the doubt, and which kinds got questioned twice. She would have told you, if you'd asked her that morning over coffee, that she treated everyone the same. She believed that. That belief was exactly what made her dangerous. "Sir, I'm going to need your cooperation," Nicole said, and her voice carried further this time. A few passengers shifted in their seats. Somewhere behind Marcus, a phone tilted upward, a soft click. Then another. "We can reseat you in 22D," Nicole continued, "and issue a travel credit for the inconvenience." Marcus looked at her, then at Gregory Doyle, settling his portfolio onto the console, like a man closing a deal that had already been decided in his favor. Then down at the boarding pass in his own hand. "I won't be moving," Marcus said. The cabin went still in a way that felt almost physical, like the pressure changing before a storm. Nicole's smile disappeared entirely. Gregory made a small, disgusted sound behind her. Marcus kept his voice level. "This is my seat. I paid for it. I have a valid boarding pass. If you want me removed, I need you to tell me, clearly on the record, why." Nicole's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out of it. She glanced toward the galley curtain, toward a man Marcus hadn't fully registered until now. Tall, silver-haired, standing with the stillness of someone who had learned long ago how to make power look like patience. Russell Kane, Meridian's vice president of operations. Marcus recognized him instantly from the due diligence files Beacon Ridge's team had assembled over the past 4 months. Russell gave Nicole the smallest nod, barely a movement at all. That nod told Marcus everything he needed to know. This was bigger than one seat, bigger than one flight attendant, bigger than Gregory Doyle and his 9 a.m. closing. This was an institution protecting its own instincts, and it had just decided, without knowing it, to protect them against the one man whose money it currently could not survive without. "Then I'll need to call security," Nicole said. Marcus's finger moved once across his phone screen, unhurried, almost gentle. A single tap. On the other end of that tap, $41 million stopped moving through a wire transfer system in real time. He set the phone face down on the tray table. "Do what you believe you have to do," he said. And in the silence that followed, Marcus Reid sat perfectly still while an airline that didn't yet know its own name was about to become a headline, began making the most expensive mistake in its 40-year history. Here's the part you need to understand before the situation gets worse, because it does get worse. Nicole's footsteps clicked down the aisle toward the galley phone in short, urgent beats, and each step sounded, in that particular silence, like a countdown clock. Marcus didn't watch her go. He didn't look at the phones recording him either. He kept his eyes on the curtain where Russell Kane stood, jaw tightening by degrees. The posture of a man who had spent 32 years learning every loophole in Meridian's rulebook and had just realized, for the first time that morning, that none of them might save him. "We need assistance in first class," Nicole said into the crew phone. Her voice dropped, but not dropped enough. Passenger refusing crew instruction. In row 3, a woman named Eleanor Whitcomb, 74 years old, a retired middle school principal from Winston-Salem, turned to her husband Harold and said quietly, "He hasn't raised his voice once." Harold kept his eyes forward. "I noticed." That was the Tier 1 moment, the one that could still, technically, be explained away as a misunderstanding if you squinted hard enough and didn't ask too many questions. It didn't stay there for long. 2 uniformed officers arrived within 4 minutes. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man named Grant Palmer, stopped at Marcus's row and asked to see the boarding pass. He studied it, actually studied it, not the performance of studying it, and something shifted in his expression. "Seat 2C, first class confirmed," Officer Palmer said slowly. "He's been difficult since boarding," Nicole cut in. "We have an important client who needs that seat, and he's holding up departure." "Difficult how?" Marcus asked, still seated, still composed. Nicole opened her mouth. Nothing came for a second. The cabin waited. The air pulled taut. "Did I raise my voice?" Marcus continued. "No." "Did I threaten anyone?" "No." "Did I refuse to show a valid ticket?" Officer Palmer was still holding the pass. He looked uncomfortable now, the way a man looks when he realizes he's been handed a problem that isn't the one he was told about. Russell Kane stepped forward before Nicole could answer again. "That's enough," Russell said, in the voice of a man used to ending conversations by simply declaring them over. "Mr. Reid, we don't want this to become unpleasant." Marcus watched him carefully. Russell knew his name. Of course he did. He'd known it before Nicole ever approached row 2. That told Marcus this had never been confusion. It had been intent, dressed in a uniform. "We're offering a reasonable alternative," Russell said. "Economy seating and a travel voucher with our appreciation." "And if I decline?" Russell's eyes hardened. "Then the crew may determine you're interfering with aircraft operations. That carries legal consequences." There it was, Tier 2, the public threat, dressed in federal-sounding language, delivered in front of 40 strangers with their phones raised. Marcus felt something rise in his chest, not the burning kind of anger, the sharpening kind. "Am I being removed," Marcus said, "because I am a threat to this aircraft?" Officer Palmer hesitated, and into that hesitation, Eleanor Whitcomb spoke for the first time, loud enough for 3 rows to hear. "No," she said, "he is not a threat. He has been polite this entire flight, and you all know it." "Ma'am, please stay out of crew matters," Nicole said. "I spent 40 years in public schools," Eleanor answered, sitting up straighter. "I know exactly what unfair treatment sounds like when it gets dressed up as policy." A young man 3 rows back, Devin Marsh, an insurance adjuster who avoided conflict by professional habit and personal temperament both, kept his phone raised, hand trembling slightly, and whispered into the recording, "You're all hearing this, right?" Officer Palmer handed the boarding pass back to Marcus. "Sir," he said quietly, "the airline can still ask you to deplane. This might be easier to resolve at the gate." Marcus took the pass. Tier 3 had arrived, the physical removal, the part that could no longer be waved away as a misunderstanding by anyone watching. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and turned to Russell Kane. "I'll deplane under protest," he said, "and I want your name, your title, and the stated reason for removing me from a seat I paid for, documented in writing before this aircraft pushes back. Gregory Doyle laughed under his breath. Good luck with that. Marcus looked at him once. Just once. And something in that look made Gregory's laugh die halfway out of his throat. Because, for the first time all morning, there was something in Marcus Reid's eyes that hadn't been there before. Not anger, not fear, but the particular stillness of a man who has stopped hoping people will simply do the right thing, and has started preparing to make them answer for not doing it. The jet bridge felt colder than the cabin. Marcus walked between the two officers with his briefcase in one hand and his boarding pass in the other, and he did not rush, because rushing would have given them something they hadn't earned. The sight of him stumbling. Behind him, through the still open aircraft door, voices spilled out in overlapping fragments. Nicole's low and urgent, Russell's lower still. Gregory Doyle's laugh, short and satisfied, like a man closing a deal that had gone exactly his way. At the gate, a little boy holding a stuffed elephant tugged his grandmother's sleeve and asked, "Did he do something bad?" His grandmother pulled him closer and said, "I don't know, sweetheart." That answer landed on Marcus harder than the removal itself had. Not the insult, the doubt left behind it. The quiet permission strangers give themselves to wonder if maybe he'd deserved it. Officer Palmer walked him to a quiet corner near the gate desk. "Mr. Reid," he said, voice lower now, almost apologetic. "Your pass was valid. I want you to know that." "Then why am I standing here?" Palmer glanced toward the aircraft, jaw working once. "Crew has authority before departure. If they say a passenger is interfering, we're required to respond. Even when..." He stopped. "Even when the passenger is sitting quietly." Marcus finished for him. Palmer didn't answer. That silence was its own answer. A gate supervisor named Patricia Reyes approached with a tablet pressed against her chest. Mid-50s, silver-framed glasses, the tight expression of someone trying to keep a small problem from becoming a large one. "Mr. Reid, we can place you on the next available flight." "I don't need the next flight," Marcus said. "I need the reason I was removed from the seat I paid for. I understand you're upset." "No," Marcus said, quiet enough that it landed harder than shouting would have. "I'm not upset. I'm documenting." He raised his phone and opened a voice recorder. "Please state your name, your title, and Meridian's official reason for removing me from seat 2C. Patricia's face changed. "I'm not comfortable being recorded." "That's your right," Marcus said. "But this conversation is happening in a public airport gate, and I'm preserving my account of what occurred here." His phone buzzed. Renee Foster, Beacon Ridge's chief operating officer, her voice sharp with worry the second the line connected. "Tell me you're all right." "I'm fine, I'm not on the plane." A pause, longer, more dangerous. "What did they do?" Marcus looked through the gate window at the aircraft, sitting bright under the morning sun, deceptively ordinary. "They removed me from a paid first-class seat to accommodate a man named Gregory Doyle." Renee exhaled slowly. "The wire transfer. Frozen," Marcus said. "Prepare a notice of material concern. I want Victor Lang's office looped in. And I want Meridian's CEO notified before any meeting takes place, not during one." "You want the CEO called now?" "Yes, before he has time to prepare a version of this that isn't true." Inside the aircraft, Nathan. "No." Russell Kane's phone buzzed once, then again, and he ignored it because he was still standing in the aisle, arguing with Gregory Doyle, who had already made himself comfortable in 2C with a drink sweating on the console beside him. Finally, Gregory said, lifting the glass slightly toward Russell, "Can we go now?" Russell didn't answer. His phone rang a second time. Thomas Ashford, CEO of Meridian Airlines, 63 years old, a man who had built his career on staying 2 steps ahead of exactly this kind of morning, and who was now, for the first time in 11 years, 1 step behind it. "William." "Russell," Thomas said, catching himself. "Why am I looking at an emergency notice from Beacon Ridge Capital? There was a passenger issue. Minor. Crew handled it." A passenger issue involving Marcus Reid. The name went through Russell like a current. On the aircraft, Nicole Hartman, who had just overheard it too, felt her fingers go loose around the tablet she was still holding. "We're confirming identity now," Russell managed. "No," Thomas said, and his voice had gone very flat. "You're done confirming. I'm looking at the investment file. Marcus Reid, Beacon Ridge Capital, Seat 2C, Flight 2D245, the same seat your crew just took from him." Russell's breathing went shallow. In 2C, Gregory Doyle noticed the shift in his posture and asked, irritated, "What's going on?" Nobody answered him. The cabin, which had begun settling back into comfort, began to shift again. A current running under the surface that nobody could name yet, but everyone could feel. "That man," Thomas said into the phone, each word deliberate, "is the reason this airline is not announcing emergency layoffs next quarter. He controls the funding that is keeping this company solvent. What exactly did your crew do to him?" Russell closed his eyes for 1 second. Marcus, watching from the gate through the terminal glass, couldn't hear any of this. But he would later, on video, watch that exact second playback to him. The small crack in a man who had spent 3 decades learning to never show one. "There was a request to accommodate a long-standing client," Russell said. Thomas went silent for 3 full seconds. Then, "You removed our largest prospective investor from first class, so Gregory Doyle could sit in a window seat." The name, Gregory Doyle, came out of Thomas Ashford's mouth, carrying something that had nothing to do with friendship anymore. Disgust, plain and unhurried. Back in the cabin, Eleanor Whitcomb watched Nicole's composure crack in real time and said quietly, "You knew, didn't you?" Nicole's mouth opened. Nothing defensible came out of it. "You knew he had a valid ticket," Eleanor pressed, "and you decided it was easier to move him than to tell Mr. Doyle no." Harold Whitcomb, who had stayed silent too long already, finally leaned forward. "My wife's right. You treated that man like trouble before he ever became a problem." Devin Marsh, 3 rows back, whispered into his still-recording phone. "They just figured out who he is." At the gate, Patricia Reyes's radio crackled. "Operations wants Mr. Reid held. Do not let him leave. Executive response team is calling." Marcus gave a small, humorless smile. "Held? That's not what it means," Patricia said quickly. "It's what they said." Officer Palmer stepped in, gentle but firm. "Mr. Reid is free to leave. He's not detained." "Of course," Patricia said, flustered. "Of course." Marcus looked at her, and there was no triumph in his expression, which somehow made her feel worse than anger would have. His phone buzzed again. Victor Lang, Beacon Ridge's general counsel, calm and clipped. "I have 3 passenger videos already. One shows the boarding pass clearly. One captures the threat of security. One shows Kane near the galley before Hartman ever approached your row." "Good," Marcus said. "There's more." "We've also found prior complaints against Meridian," Victor said. "Similar language, similar pattern. Premium cabin removals, vague safety justifications. Mostly Black and Latino passengers, going back at least 5 years." Marcus closed his eyes for half a breath. That was the part he had feared most. Not that it had happened to him, but that it had happened before. To people with no lawyers, no leverage, and no one on the other end of a phone call willing to freeze $41 million on their behalf. "Preserve everything," he said. Already doing it. Inside the cabin, Russell Kane ended his call with Thomas Ashford and turned toward Nicole, voice dropping to something almost desperate. "Get him back on the plane." "What? Now?" Nicole looked toward 2C, where Gregory Doyle was still settled, drink in hand. "Doyle," Russell said, walking into the cabin, "there's been a change. You need to return to your assigned seat." Gregory's face darkened. "You gave me this seat, and now I'm taking it back." Gregory laughed, disbelieving. "You cannot be serious." Russell leaned in close enough that only the front 3 rows could hear. "For once in your life, read the room." That line landed hard enough that several phones lifted higher. Nicole walked back toward the jet bridge. each step slower than the last, and when she reached Marcus at the gate, she stopped several feet away, her voice small. "Mr. Reid, we can reseat you in first class." Marcus looked at her, not cruelly, just carefully. "No, we can restore your seat." "You cannot restore what happened," Marcus said. He glanced past her, through the glass, at the cabin, where he had just been humiliated in front of 40 strangers. A seat is easy to give back. Dignity is not. Nobody spoke. Not Nicole, not Patricia, not the officers standing nearby. His phone buzzed one more time. Thomas Ashford's office, calling directly now. Marcus answered on speaker, so that everyone standing near the gate could hear every word, including the strain underneath Thomas's carefully controlled tone. "Mr. Reid, this is Thomas Ashford. I want to apologize for what happened this morning. With respect, Mr. Ashford, you don't yet know what happened." A pause. "Then tell me." Marcus turned slightly but didn't lower his voice. "I boarded with a valid, paid first-class ticket. Your flight attendant questioned my right to sit in it. Your vice president of operations personally directed the crew to remove me. Your staff threatened to classify my refusal as interference with aircraft operations. Security was called on a man who never raised his voice, to make room for a passenger who admitted, in front of witnesses, that he simply wanted the seat." Thomas exhaled slowly on the other end. "Mr. Reid, I understand why you're upset." "No," Marcus said, "you understand the financial exposure. I'm asking whether you understand the human one." A longer silence this time. "There are people who go through exactly what happened to me an hour ago," Marcus continued, "and they don't get a call from a CEO. They don't have a general counsel standing by. They don't control a funding agreement that can freeze your quarterly numbers. They just lose the seat, swallow the insult, and are told to be grateful they were allowed to fly at all." Inside the aircraft, Gregory Doyle, now standing in the aisle, red-faced, snapped, "This is insane. I was told the seat was available." Eleanor Whitcomb turned toward him fully. "You knew it wasn't yours. You just believed wanting it was enough." Several passengers murmured agreement. Gregory looked around and realized, with visible discomfort, that the cabin had changed sides without asking his permission. "I am coming to the airport," Thomas said into the phone. "No," Marcus answered. "I won't turn this into a hallway apology. The board meets at Meridian headquarters at 2 o'clock. Your general counsel should be present. Mr. Kane should be present. Miss Hartman should be preserved as a witness, not coached into a scapegoat." Nicole flinched at the sound of her own name. "What do you need before that meeting?" Thomas asked. "Preserve every video, every crew communication, every gate log, every internal message. Do not delete, edit, or instruct anyone to revise a statement." "Of course," Thomas said, too quickly. Marcus heard the fear underneath it now. "Put it in writing." Within 10 minutes, yes. Back in the cabin, Harold Whitcomb, 76, stiff-kneed, rose slowly to his feet, and when he spoke, his voice carried the whole length of the aisle. "You took a quiet man with a valid ticket and tried to make him look dangerous, because that made it easier to give away what already belonged to him." Nobody clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment, but every phone in the cabin caught every word. By the time Marcus reached Meridian's headquarters that afternoon, the lobby, glass, steel, a wall of framed photographs celebrating the airline's 40-year history under a banner reading, "Connecting people with dignity since 1984, had gone unnaturally quiet. A young receptionist stood the moment he walked in, already warned, already braced, for shouting she wouldn't need to prepare for. Thomas Ashford met him at the elevator on the 32nd floor, along with 2 board members, Diane Cross and Martin Yates. Thomas extended his hand. Marcus shook it, professionally, not warmly. "I'm sorry you had to come here under these circumstances," Thomas said. "Circumstances are usually created by choices," Marcus answered. Inside the boardroom, a paused video filled the wall screen. Marcus in the aisle, Nicole in front of him, Russell behind her, Gregory watching from the side. Nobody in the room could look directly at it for long. Russell Kane sat halfway down the table, arrogance still present but visibly thinned, like a coat. 2 sizes too big for the man now wearing it. Nicole sat 2 seats away, pale, hands folded, so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Gregory Doyle was not in the room. That, at least, was the one wise decision Meridian had made all day. Before anything else, Thomas began, "I want to say Meridian takes this matter seriously. I hope you understand how little that sentence means. After the damage is already done," Marcus said. Russell leaned back. "With respect, the facts are still being gathered." There was confusion during boarding, a crew decision made under time pressure. I regret that it escalated. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Confusion didn't remove me from my seat. Pressure didn't call security. Time didn't treat Gregory Doyle as entitled and me as suspicious. People did that. "I never instructed anyone to discriminate," Russell said. "No," Marcus said. "People like you rarely use that word. You use words like accommodation and priority and client experience. You make bias sound operational." Diane Cross leaned forward. "Mr. Reid, what do you want from this room today?" It was the first honest question anyone had asked him all day. "I want Meridian to stop asking how to survive the headline and start asking who else got hurt before I had enough leverage to make you listen." Nicole made a small sound, almost a sob. Marcus turned to her. "Miss Hartman, did Mr. Kane tell you to find a reason if I pushed back?" "Claire, Nicole, you don't have to answer that without counsel," Russell cut in. "That's true," Marcus said. "You don't have to." Nicole looked at Russell, then at the frozen image of herself on the screen. And for the first time she seemed to see what the rest of the world already had. Not a policy decision. A woman in uniform using borrowed authority to make a stranger smaller. "He told me a VIP client needed that seat," she said, voice shaking. He said she stopped. "Go on," Marcus said, quiet, not unkind. "He said to find a reason if I got pushback." The room went still. Russell's chair creaked. "That is not what I said," he snapped. Nicole turned toward him, tears running freely now. "Yes, it is." Victor Lang, seated near the end of the table, didn't look up from his legal pad. "Every word of that is on the record." Then Renee Foster's voice came through the wall monitor, live from Beacon Ridge's offices. "There's a second video." Timestamped before the flight attendant approached, row 2. A new clip played. Shaky footage from just inside the jet bridge, Russell's voice audible near the galley curtain. "Find a reason. Doyle needs that seat." Nobody breathed for a moment. Diane Cross closed her eyes. "My God. That's out of context," Russell said. "No," Marcus said. "It's very much in context." Thomas sat down slowly, like a man whose knees had finally accepted what his mind had been resisting all afternoon. "Russell, did you instruct cabin crew to remove Marcus Reid from his assigned seat?" Russell lifted his chin, and something in him, the caution that had lasted exactly this long, finally gave out. "I instructed them to resolve a seating conflict." "There was no conflict," Marcus said, "until you created one." Russell looked around the table, searching for allies and finding fewer than he expected. "We have high-value clients. We make accommodations. That is business. Not every unpleasant interaction is discrimination." "You're right," Marcus said, and the room seemed to lean in, surprised. "Not every unpleasant interaction is discrimination. That is exactly why evidence matters. Patterns matter. Who gets believed first matters." "You want to make this about race because it gives you leverage," Russell said, voice rising now. The mask fully gone. Nicole flinched. Diane's eyes snapped open in something close to horror. Thomas said sharply, "Russell." But Russell was past the point of stopping. "People like me built this airline. And people like you," Diane Cross said, closing the folder in front of her, "made some of our customers afraid to board it." The words landed and stayed there. Russell had nothing after that, for the first time all day. His phone began buzzing, one call after another. Reporters. Board allies. Possibly Gregory Doyle, possibly a lawyer, the old network waking up and trying to protect itself the way it always had. Thomas looked toward the security manager standing near the door. Escort Mr. Kane out. Company devices stay here. He may collect personal items only. You cannot seize my property, Russell said. Company phone, company laptop, company access credentials, Thomas said. You wrote that policy yourself, 11 years ago. Two security officers stepped forward, careful, almost apologetic. The way people move around powerful men who have just discovered they aren't anymore. Russell straightened his jacket and looked at Marcus one final time. You think this makes you righteous? No, Marcus said, voice low and even. It makes you accountable. The officers let him out. The door closed. For a long moment, nobody in the room moved. Victor Lang broke the silence first. We'll need written confirmation of the suspension, full preservation of records, and an independent investigator retained by end of day. You'll have it, Thomas said. And Miss Hartman needs protection from retaliation, Renee added from the screen. Not just words, written protection. Nicole looked up, startled. She had braced herself for blame, maybe termination. She hadn't expected the man she'd helped humiliate to insist she not be crushed by the same system that had used her first. Why would you protect me? She asked Marcus. Because accountability isn't revenge, he said. What you did was wrong. But if you tell the truth, this company doesn't get to punish you for exposing the chain of command that made you do it. A junior attorney rushed in, whispering something to Diane Cross, whose expression changed instantly. We have another problem, she said. Communications sent a holding statement 30 minutes ago before legal review. She read it aloud. Meridian Airlines is aware of an incident involving a passenger who was reaccommodated following standard procedures. We take customer concerns seriously. The room went cold. Marcus closed his eyes. Reaccommodated, he repeated. It turns removal into comfort. Turns discrimination into procedure. It turns me into a concern. Retract it, Thomas said. No, replace it with the truth. What would you have us say? He asked Marcus. Outside the windows, a Meridian jet lifted cleanly into the afternoon sky, climbing bright and steady, the way a flight is supposed to feel. A bridge from where you are to where you need to go, nothing more. Nobody should have to earn dignity at a departure gate to get there. Say a passenger with a valid first-class ticket was wrongly removed from his seat, Marcus said. Say Russell Kane has been suspended from operational duty pending termination review. Say the company is preserving records and appointing an independent investigator. Say employees who come forward in good faith will be protected. And say Meridian is examining whether this incident reflects a pattern that goes back years. Because it does. The corrected statement went out within the hour. By evening, it had reached every major outlet in the country, and the original footage. Eleanor Whitcomb's voice, Devon Marsh's trembling recording. The sight of a calm man being walked off a plane he had every legal right to sit on. Had been viewed more than 4 million times. The board convened at 5 o'clock, joined by directors from 3 other cities on video. Victor Lang played all 3 clips in sequence. A director from Savannah took off his glasses and set them on the table without a word. A younger board member, Simone Carver, watched Marcus the entire time, not with pity, but with something closer to recognition. My father stopped flying business class for 11 years, she said quietly. Once the video ended, after being removed from a seat he'd paid for, he never sued. Never made a scene. He just stopped going anywhere he didn't feel safe. Her voice held steady, though her eyes didn't. That was never a customer service issue. That was a wound. The vote that followed wasn't close. Russell Kane's suspension would proceed to formal termination review. An independent civil rights firm would investigate every premium cabin removal complaint filed against Meridian over the past 5 years. A number that, once the investigators finished their work 8 weeks later, would total 31 separate incidents, 26 of them involving Black or Latino passengers. 4 of them settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements that had kept the pattern buried until now. An enforceable passenger dignity policy would be written, with real consequences attached, not slogans. Every gate agent and flight crew member would undergo mandatory bias and de-escalation training designed by an outside firm with no relationship to Meridian's legal department. "It's a beginning," Thomas said, once the vote passed. "Only if you treat it like one," Marcus answered. 6 months later, Marcus Reid flew Meridian again, a decision Renee Foster had questioned more than once, and one he'd made deliberately, the way a man tests a bridge he helped rebuild. He didn't fly first class that day. He sat in 14C, economy, by choice, the coin from his mother's pocket, riding in his jacket the way it always did. Halfway through the flight, a young gate agent recognized him and came down the aisle just to say that the new complaint reporting system had already flagged and corrected 2 seating disputes that week, quietly. Before either one became a headline, Russell Kane's name never appeared on Meridian's payroll again. He was last seen giving a single interview to a business trade publication, still insisting, 18 months later, that he'd simply been resolving a seating conflict under time pressure, a sentence that had, by then, become something closer to a punchline than a defense, repeated in compliance trainings across the industry as the textbook example of exactly what not to say. Nicole Hartman kept her job, completed the retraining program Meridian built, and 2 years later became one of the lead instructors teaching it to new hires. Not because anyone forgave what she'd done, but because she was the rare person willing to stand in front of a room and admit, out loud, precisely how easy it had been to go along with something she knew, even in the moment, was wrong. Somewhere over Kansas, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his mother, now 78, still sharp enough to track every headline that mentioned her son's name. "Standing tall was never about not getting hurt," she'd written. "It's about not letting the hurt teach you to bow." He read it twice, and for the first time in 6 months, let his shoulders drop, not in defeat. In release. He turned the silver dollar over once in his pocket, the way he always did before landing, and looked out at the clouds passing beneath the wing, thinking about all the passengers on all the other flights, on all the other mornings, who had lost far more than a seat and had no one on the other end of a phone call, willing to freeze anything on their behalf. That, he understood now, was the real work still ahead. Not the seat, not the money, the seeing. If this story moved you, not because of how it ended, but because you recognized someone in it, maybe even yourself, like it, so it reaches someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's ever been made to feel smaller than they are. And tell me in the comments, have you ever stood in that cabin, on either side of it? I read every answer.